If you have $1 million or more saved up, then we're going to talk about some estate planning considerations and strategies to be aware of to ensure that you can protect your wealth and also make sure you can leave behind to your loved ones as much wealth as possible. And if you haven't heard the term called the Midwestern Millionaire, I would encourage you to look into this a little bit more, because this is a term that I created, and I'm actually writing a book about it right now. And this is about the fact that the best savers are the worst spenders, and because of that, they're going to be left with a legacy at the end of time, is ultimately what we see with the people we work with. So we work with people who have saved $1 million or more, who need more help with more advanced type planning. And so what we're going to talk about today is what we do with many of the people that we work with to make sure that they can protect that wealth that they've created.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So back to that Midwestern Millionaire concept. Remember, these people are hardworking, they're frugal, and they're diligent savers. And so if that's you, congrats, you're in the best spot. So now what do we need to do to protect our wealth? So the first thing to understand is, what is your goals here, right? We can't really help you understand what you should do until you decide what you want to do. So for example, you may want to give all your money to the kids when you pass away. Okay, great. There's different strategies for that. Versus if you want to give all your money to a charity when you pass away, well, that's going to be a little bit different. We're going to look at a different set of strategies. So first step is understanding, what do you want to do with your assets and what are your goals? What's your purpose behind your money? And that's something that we always focus on with estate planning for our clients, is what we call our purpose conversation. Having a real in-depth conversation of understanding, hey, you're probably not going to spend all this money. So we have a lot of tools, resources that we show our clients to show them that, hey, if you keep spending what you're going to spend, you're likely never going to run out of money. Most of our clients understand that because they've been diligent savers. So then it becomes a conversation of, well, if that's the case, well, you can't bring a U-Haul with you when you pass away. So is our goal to maximize to the charities and kids like we talked about? Or do you want to spend this money? And that's, part of estate planning too, is maybe we don't want to leave anything left behind. Maybe we do want that last dollar to bounce back. So ultimately that's your decision, but that's where all of this starts to decide, what is going to be best for you there. So that's some considerations for the estate planning. Many people don't think about that when we talk to them. They say, maybe I'll talk about that later. We don't know when that day can come, and so we need to make sure we're planning for that. And a lot of people come to us too, and they want to plan for their spouses, and we're going to talk about that in today's video as well, where they just want to make sure that both of them are good if one were to pass away early. So one of the first things that we need to understand is to ensure that our assets don't go to probate. So a last will and testament does not avoid probate. That tells the probate courts of what to do. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we hear out there. And so what you're really going to need to do to avoid probate is a few different things. One is that if you have an IRA or a 401k or a retirement account, make sure that you have a beneficiary on file. That will pass by beneficiary, and so you want to make sure that's up to date and accurate. I had a client one time where they said, my husband passed away and I don't know why I'm not getting this account. And we looked into it, and it wasn't her as a beneficiary. It was actually the ex-spouse. And so I would encourage you, don't ever be in that situation. Just make sure it's updated. And even if you've never had a divorce, well, maybe you just never put it on file the right way, or maybe something's spelled wrong, or whatever it is. Just make sure it's easy, it's up to date, and you're all good. We check beneficiaries for our clients, every single year to make sure it's exactly how they want it, because this is something that, is so important that you just don't want to have it wrong. So that's the case for those accounts. And then if you have a bank account, you typically want to have what's called a payable on death on those accounts. And that's going to just transfer it right to the beneficiary without probate as well. And let's take a step back, right? What is probate? Well, probate's a very costly situation if you don't have your assets titled the right way. I mean, it can cost 4 to 7% of your estate that has to go to probate. So basically it's unnecessary fees when you can easily avoid it by doing the things we're talking about, but it also can take a lot of time. You may not be able to touch these assets, not you're no longer here, but your beneficiaries may not be able to touch your assets for months or even longer if this prolongs and it has to go through the courts. So that's why we want to avoid probate. A lot of people definitely want to avoid it. If you've ever been in this situation, you understand why it's so important to plan for it. So just make sure that you're aware of that. So we talked about the retirement accounts. We talked about the bank accounts. Now, what about non-qualified accounts such as your house or maybe those stocks that you have? Well, you can do what's called a trust, right? Many people have heard of a trust, but a trust also costs some significant money depending on how you get that prepared. And so if that's the case, then you have to decide, is that worth it or not? So trust can have many pros and cons with it. I would say with the clients we work with, the Midwestern millionaires that we work with, probably about 40% of them overall get a trust. And the reason why is because in some states, you don't necessarily need a trust to transfer your assets. So let's just think of it this way. Let's say that you have a simple situation, and we'll just use my home state of Ohio here. In Ohio, your retirement account's passed by beneficiary, like we talked about, your bank account by POD, and then in most people's situation, they may have some non-qualified accounts. Okay, just put the beneficiary on file. And then they have their house is typically the case. Now, for your house here in Ohio, you could have a trust and it would avoid probate if you title your house in the name of the trust, but you also could do something called a transfer on death. And a transfer on death says that, hey, pay $50 to get that thing filed, and then it can just go right to whoever you have the beneficiary on the transfer on death title, and then it will be good to go. So a way to save thousands of dollars on a trust is by doing what's called a transfer on death. Now here's the deal. We work with clients all across the country, and there's a lot of states that don't have this opportunity. For example, I can think of North Carolina. You can't do that. So for our clients in North Carolina, it may be more likely to need a trust. So that's just one reason why you would do a trust versus not do a trust. There's many other reasons to do a trust. And even in our clients in Ohio, there's still, a significant amount that are going to do a trust for other reasons. But I just want people to be aware of you may not need to do a trust if you have more of a simple estate there. Even if you have $1 million or more, if you just have your IRAs, your house, bank accounts, like I said, you could easily avoid the probate just by those titlings there. So that's what I really want you to be aware of. Hopefully that can save some people money, but just understand the state you're in is going to dictate what you're allowed to do there. The next thing I want you to be aware of if you have $1 million or more is something called the estate tax. Now, this isn't something you need to be worried about right now because the limits are so high, and it's also looking like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act could get extended. Now, if they keep this in place, it's just going to depend. We just have to wait 2 more years to see what happens. But the estate tax right now, unless you have nearly $30 million if you're a married couple, or 15 if you're single, somewhere around that range, then you're not going to have to worry about this. But what I'm worried about is what is the estate tax going to do moving forward. So whenever we do planning, we don't want to look at it now, we want to look at it in the future as well, especially when we're thinking about estate planning, because if we're planning to live until our 80s or 90s and we're only 60 right now, well, we need a plan that's going to last 20, 30 years. We can't just make all the decisions today, right? So this is something that you're going to want to have on your radar as time goes. And the reason why I'm giving you a little fear with this is because it's a heavy tax. It can be a 40 or 50% tax rate if you look historically. And if you look historically, in 2001, it was $1,000. And I think 1997, it was like $600,000, meaning if your net worth, not your investments, your net worth was over $1 million in 2001, then you would have to pay nearly a 40 or 50% tax rate on the amount above that. And so if you're finding yourself with $1 million right now, well, if you're 60, by the time you pass away, your wealth could double or even more if you're not going to need to touch your investments. Maybe you have a pension or you have Social Security that you're living off of, or maybe you're not going to have to take that much out from your investments. Well, you may be left with $2-3 million, and that can be more easily hit those limits. Or maybe you have $2 million right now. Well, now you can have $4 or $8 million if that money just continues to compound and grow. The Rule of 72 says that your assets can double in 10 years if you just get a 7% rate of return. And in 12 years, it could double if you get a 6% rate of return. And that means you didn't take anything out, you didn't put anything into it. So just understand, over time, that's how compound interest works. It just keeps growing and growing. So if you have $1 million in 10 years, now it's $2 million, and then it's $4 million in 20 years. And if you live 30 years, it could be $8 million. So you can see how this can grow by the time you pass to where this estate tax should actually come into play. So this is something we have to really educate Midwestern millionaires on. And again, it's maybe a reason to give more now, utilize those gifting limits that we have right now, or maybe it's a reason to spend more money like we talked about. So those are the considerations. So not too much has to be planned for right now. Unless you have $5 million or more, then you want to start to consider it as typically our rule of thumb, depending on your age. But anything less than that, probably not that as important to plan for now, but keep it in your mind as time goes, looking at things like a CRT or irrevocable trust, or different planning strategies like gifting, or whatever that may be, to ensure you can stay under those limits is going to be important for you. The next thing that I think is important to understand is the power of a Roth. And so with a Roth, anything left behind to your heirs is going to be tax-free. So, we can look at this in 2 ways. 1, your kids; 2, your spouse. And there's a third way is charity. So if your goal is to leave all your money to a charity, this Roth concept is probably not going to make as much sense, because if you leave an IRA to a charity, that's tax-free. For your Roth, you've already paid taxes on it, then it goes to charity. Yes, it's tax-free, but it would have been tax-free if you went to your kids. So what we typically do as a planning is any Roth dollars, that's what we're going to want to leave the kids. Any IRAs, if you do want to be charitable minded, let's leave that to the charity. So just some smart tax planning to consider if you are going to have multiple beneficiaries. But if your big goal is to leave money behind to your kids or your spouse, then you're going to want to consider a Roth for sure. And there's a few reasons why. One, with a Roth, you do not have to do RMDs on that. So RMDs are required minimum distributions at either age 73 or 75. That's depending on when you were born. If you're born in 1960 or after, then it's 75. And so this is a time when you're forced to take out money from your traditional IRAs. Now, if you were to take your traditional IRA and move it to a Roth IRA, it's called a Roth conversion. We're seeing a lot of people do that right now. Then you have to pay your taxes now. But in the Roth IRA, you never have to pay your tax moving forward, but also you're not required to take out that money at RMD age of 73 or 75. So there gives you more flexibility that if you want to leave your wealth behind, you can let this grow past those dates so that you don't have to worry about taking anything out, and you can let that compound and grow like the scenario we just explained. And so that's why the Roth can be powerful, and especially for the kids, because of they have to take that money out in 10 years. And so if you gave them $1 million to one child, for example, well, now they're going to have to probably take out about $100,000 a year, which is going to increase their income while they're working and probably making the most money at unknown tax rates when that happens. And so what's that going to put them in their situation? Would it make more sense to just pay the taxes now at your rates, where historically right now tax rates are lower? And if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act gets extended like we can be expecting, then could give some good opportunity over the next so many years to do things like a Roth contribution or a Roth conversion to really maximize that situation and to leave your kids with potentially more wealth. Now, on the other side of your spouse, we see a lot of people really wanting to do a Roth for their spouse, because what happens when one spouse passes, and it's another strategy consideration we want people to be aware of, is what's called the widow's penalty. So when one spouse passes, you lose one of the Social Securities because you get the higher of the two, but your taxes are nearly going to double. And so because your taxes are nearly going to double, that's because you go from married filing jointly to single. And so we'd rather have the Roth for that single, because you're going to have to pay more taxes typically. And so if we can pay the taxes on the Roth conversion now at married filing jointly rates, we'll pay less in taxes on that conversion. And then when we are single at the higher rates, then we can take it out tax-free. So the alternatives, if we don't do anything, well, we're not going to utilize the more generous rates now. And then when we do get to that time, we're going to have to take it out, and it's going to bump us up to higher tax brackets than probably what we could have when we were married. Could force us to pay higher Medicare premiums, more in Social Security tax, and it's going to cost us to pay more taxes all in. But remember, we also lost the Social Security benefit, so now we're going to have to pay, we're going to have less income, and we're going to have to probably pay more taxes. And so, again, this is something you can get ahead of with this type of planning. So we see a lot of people that come to us really concerned about that widow's penalty when they look at estate planning, when they have $1 million or more, because they're worried about a lot of things. And I've done some other content on this idea, but making sure their spouse is taken care of is very, very important to them. I'd say that's probably one of the number one reasons we get people from YouTube that schedule time with us wanting to work with us, is because they say, hey, I know this stuff pretty well, I've done pretty well, but I need a team. And I need a team because, one, I want to delegate this and enjoy my retirement. I don't need I don't know the tax planning, the way I need to. I don't read the tax code. I'm not staying up to date. And I want to make sure that the third reason, which is probably the most important, is I want to make sure my spouse is taken care of, because they're not engaged in this as I am. And if I were to pass, they're not going to know what to do, and they're going to be left to try to find a team that maybe they're not going to trust as fully. But also a lot of people say, hey, I want to test this out to make sure it works. So if that's the case, everything's prepared and good to go. And we'd ultimately recommend that if that's your goal, is to make sure your spouse is good to go moving forward. We understand that not everyone loves to do financial planning and loves retirement planning and loves watching YouTube videos. We get a lot of people that schedule, and the one has watched all of our videos, the other has not watched any, or maybe one or two. And it's just funny to see. But again, they're both just as comfortable because they know that they're going to be getting taken care of with the strategies that they're looking for. So those are some of the main things to be aware of there. And if you are looking for this type of guidance with some more advanced type strategies or some more advanced tax and estate planning help, as you know, the Midwestern Millionaire, we talked about that book. This is all about the more wealth you have, the harder it gets from a planning standpoint. We always say that, if you don't have as much saved, there may not be as much opportunity for you, but the more you have saved, the more opportunity. So again, if you want to be the best steward of your wealth, then you're going to want to make sure you're implementing these strategies is what we see. And so if you would like to schedule a call with our team, if you feel like the type of planning we do and the videos that we produce is what you're looking for, then you do have the opportunity to schedule a call in the description below. And so that will give you an opportunity to fill out a questionnaire. And then based on that questionnaire, we'll decide if we want to schedule that time. And based on that time, will give us an opportunity to see if we could be a good fit. And then if so, we can schedule another session to explore further and make sure that everything, is going to be good. So that is an opportunity. Understand that we can't work with everyone that reaches out to us. Over the past couple weeks, we've had over 50 people reach out to us from YouTube, which is great. We try to help as many of them as we can, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure we're working with the right people who our skill sets and our planning can help the most. And so that's why we structure it the way we do. But, we're going to continue this content. We love helping educate. We do as many workshops in the community. We love this YouTube channel. We love that it's grown so much. We love the feedback we get from you all. And if you don't mind, put in your comments of what other videos would you like to hear? What other content can I produce? What stuck out to you today that maybe would be great for another video? So with that being said, we love that you view this, subscribe, and you'll get more notifications for these videos, and we'll see you on the next one.